Nick?
Yep, I'm back.
Okay, so we're not gonna have video, we're just gonna have audio? It appears. That's okay though, right?
I'll put the YouTube stream up.
Yeah. Okay, cool. We're good. All right. So for that, we're just gonna have streamed audio. And we did the minutes. We have correspondence from a Mr. I believe it's a Mr. Fran Bogdanovich. And it's in your packet to read on the project. Going forward, old business, we do not have any new business. Adam, I'm guessing this is you or Alan on the schedule?
Yep.
Everybody get a meeting packet?
No.
Do you have any answer to the meeting packets?
Here, you can take mine.
Here, you can take mine.
Is there no what?
No, take that. That's okay. Yep, positive. Yeah, so schedule, I think it's in your packet, but I didn't print it anymore because I know we've been meeting every couple of weeks now. So we are currently in the preliminary design phase right now, the PDP phase, which will go until the submission, which is May 6th. That's when the JWA will make the submission. And then from there, we're going to move into the preferred study and the preferred schematic report phase of the project. And that's going to run roughly until the end of August. So from there, we'll move into schematic design after that. So right now we're still on schedule that we started with at the beginning of this. And if there's any questions as far as schedule goes, like I said, the submission is going to go in on May 6th, next week.
And just everything should go okay, but should it not?
Yeah.
From a vote perspective, what does that do to the schedule?
So we can reach out to the MSBA and let them know that, maybe there's some tweaks that need to be done. I imagine that we can do that.
Yeah, just a matter of how big or how many issues there are with
Yeah.
the PDP. The PDP is basically your program. It's your program. The MSBA, as long as it meets the standards that they're looking for, they'd be hard pressed to be questioning that for any reason.
Yeah.
So, and we see nothing wrong with it by, with the design team and ourselves. So it's pretty status quo.
Yeah, I was just asking.
Yeah, but if something like this evening, if I want to vote or, if it didn't pass or whatever the situation may be, we'd reach out to the MSBA tomorrow, let them know that we're going to have another vote. When that's going to be scheduled, and just let them know it's, if it's going to be delayed.
Okay. Where you may see something change is when we get further along in the project and you have the facilities assessment subcommittee and you're putting in a preferred schematic design and they're looking at it going, we don't think that's really great architecture or something like that. And also they want to have their hand in the cook, be the cook too. And, sometimes you get a little of that, but not typically.
Okay. All right, that was the schedule. Let me go next to review the preliminary cost options. So Christian, that's going to be you.
Presentation that needs to be pulled up there.
Everybody has that in their packet as a draft, right? Yeah.
So Mark, you want to first go a few more sort of the agenda versus schedule big. So a little bit of this is a review from the last time you met, which was 2 weeks ago. Jordan and George were there. I was not. The other folks were out for a break, but basically, through the process, we had brainstormed 10 options to start with. Next slide, Marty. Based on the meeting 2 weeks ago and the meeting prior to that, we've kind of narrowed it down already to 5 generally. I think there's really, it seems like one in particular has really popped out, but to do our due diligence and really walk through them, we wanted to go through these 5. The first, the base repair code upgrade, again, a requirement from the MSBA. And really that's kind of where the end of this preliminary design program report is the point of it is to have us start narrowing these options down. So I think we've already done a very good job of that. If in our narrative we can signal to the MSBA, we're going to pursue these 3 or 4 during the preferred schematic report phase, but really the committee is interested in this one in particular. I think that's perfect. That's exactly what they're looking for is that kind of feedback so that they can kind of understand the process and see which direction the building committee is headed in.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
I know we've talked about this before, but what is the required, what do we have to do as opposed to what we want to do?
So the only one that's really required is the base repair code upgrade.
So
At
just
some
one.
point, they want to see an ad reno option, but we've kind of already covered that in the
Okay.
PDP phase. So that's the only one that's really
required. Okay.
So that has to be there, and then at least one more will, because that probably, based upon looking at numbers, or whatever else, we may say we want 1 or 2 or maybe 3. But
Oh, that's fine.
it's good to keep paring it down. Like if we know it's not Glenbrook, then like just,
Right.
okay,
Mhm.
okay.
And because the other thing that we're doing is, so right now, right, we have spent a little bit of your money to look at hazardous materials for both buildings. We're awaiting those reports. We're doing a traffic analysis for both sites. And so if we're able to narrow it down to one site, then we can start, we've held off on doing geotechnical borings. Because we're not quite at that point where they're gonna make a huge impact on the cost, but eventually we'll want to start getting that information. And so if we're able to focus those activities on one site in particular, getting a detailed site plan of the existing conditions, that's also helpful.
Thank you.
Those things. There we go. Great. This is actually a little teaser. We're gonna go through a lot of numbers tonight, but we will end with some pretty pictures. And so these are just from Halverson and Ty and Bond, looking at existing conditions, site plans. This will be going in with the preliminary design program with this report that we're submitting next week. And we have some proposed options that we'll cover at the very end of the meeting. And these we can kind of go through fairly quickly. These again were covered 2 weeks ago, but again, just for the 5 that we're pushing ahead, we have the base repair code upgrade. And I'm happy to go back to these as necessary, but I just want to kind of whiz right through these.
So all these are exactly the same. The scoring is the same. The only thing that's changed is that we will have prices affixed to them in a couple minutes based upon that.
Exactly. So the
Okay.
score here was 35 points based off of a weight factor and the scores that we gave them. And I've got a summary at the end too, so that'll help too. But base repair, then the next one down is the Ad Reno 665 at Glenbrook. Again, keeping the auditorium, cafeteria, arch wing, but really kind of new school otherwise. Next one down. And that one scored at 126. Not that number has to be the end all be all, but it's helpful to kind of have these somewhat more objective criteria that we can apply to it. Next was new 665 at Glenbrook. This one was interesting in that we are trying to put the new school in roughly the same footprint as the existing, a little bit more condensed, but we thought it was better to do that than to utilize the fields down below. Helps preserve those for future use. So you can see on the next slide, some of the scoring kind of suffered because of that. So does not require phasing, which is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish down. A weight factor of 4, it gets a score of 0 because it would require some phasing. It would require some modulars during construction, et cetera. But a score of 155. Ad Reno for Williams, again, saving the auditorium and the cafeteria. Otherwise, pretty much new school. Apart from that, and again, similar scoring on the next sheet, already at 127. And then 665 new at Williams. This is the new school on the site where the fields are currently, so we're able to phase the construction, not disrupt students in a negative manner as much. And so you'll see that reflected in the score on the next sheet, with a score of 194. So again, meets the district's strategic vision, meets long-term operating costs, meets the educational space needs, doesn't require phasing, maximizes MSBA grant potential. There was some question of that. So with this option, there were some questions on that last week. If we're consolidating all the students at Williams, the MSBA is not participating in the Glenbrook site. So the existing Glenbrook school would remain as is, and that would become an opportunity for the town to decide what to do with that existing building and site. The MSBA process would, of course, pay for the demolition of the Williams School and the new fields and new parking that would happen in that location. So this is a summary of all 10 options. Again, with that scoring matrix, grayed out are the ones. First, the 345s were eliminated back in early April. It was really seen that we wanted the solution to be a solution for the entire middle school population. Didn't feel fair otherwise, and also would be quite a tax impact in just a few more years to do yet another project. And then looking at Russell Fields and Turner Park in a little more detail, and then again, really considering the MSBA reimbursement for those options also were eliminated. So 1, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are the ones remaining. So those were the 5 that we brought to the cost estimator. This is a summary slide. We just brought out the particulars of option A over there on the right so that you can kind of see the process that they went through. PMNC does a tremendous amount of MSBA work. I think they're probably involved in 90% of the projects that go through the state. They do other work too. We've used them for fire stations and senior centers and all kinds of projects. So they really have their finger on the market. They are also well aware of differences between the western part of the state and the eastern part of the state, which we really appreciate. All of that being said, right now they wanted me to really emphasize this note over here on the left, that this represents the comparative differences between the options and not the final budget, because there are so many details that they do not yet know, right? So we do not know the geotechnical conditions of the site. We don't know what type of foundation will be. We do have, that being said, they also tried to take as much information as we could give them into account as part of this project. So they understand that we're interested in geothermal. So they put that into the numbers that they've got in front of you. They understand a rough hazmat number that we got from looking at the previous AHERA reports from the 2 schools. So, they're not numbers in a total vacuum, but not a tremendous amount of detail at this point in time. So, so I've got a little bit of summary on the next slide.
And just before we move on, for everybody, there's on the 2 columns, and he has it on the 3rd bullet. There is a difference between the design bid build, or DBB, and construction manager at risk, the CMR. We are going to discuss that at a meeting going forward about which way we want to go, whether we're just going to do design bid build or we're going to do construction manager at risk. Not important to know too much right now about what the difference between them. The cost may look different. In the end, it may or may not be different depending on how it goes. So just to let you know, we priced out both ways just so that we have a view of it right now. We'll have a large discussion about which way we're going to go with the project at some point in the future.
Well said. Yeah. Need to talk questions on that. So these are just the construction costs. So this is kind of, if we go design bid build, this is when you open the bids on bid day, the number that you want to see from the contractor, right? So these aren't project costs of the whole thing, but really that construction cost number. And that's ranging anywhere from 61 million to 127 million. What's interesting to see is that the addition renovations and the new are all coming in very, very close to one another. And that's something that's changed over the years as we've kind of gone through this process. In general, ad renos used to be less expensive than new construction, as the code requirements and especially the stretch energy code have continued to kind of ratchet things up, which is a great thing. It's good for energy use. It's good for your utility bills going forward. But that has made those ad reno opportunities not look so enticing, I would say generally. And so that's something to keep in mind for this option A, for the base repair code upgrade. A lot of people will be surprised at how large that number is. That includes taking the existing Glenbrook School, wrapping the whole thing in insulation and giving it a new exterior finish. That includes putting in an entirely new HVAC systems. It includes putting in a sprinkler system because there is no one now. It includes an accessible walkway from the parking lot to the front door. It includes an elevator. So it's addressing all of, if you were to take that existing building, bring it up to code today for both accessibility, energy, any other code concerns, that's what's generating that number. So it's not a small, it's not a small scope. It would be a huge project, replacing all of the windows, replacing all of the doors.
Would it be one elevator or two? No, it doesn't matter right now, but because our thing is so weird there. with
We
three
found one
levels.
spot where it could be one, but
Oh,
it would be a
interesting.
3-stop elevator, and it would
Okay.
have to go in a very specific spot, which
Okay.
involves us digging a large hole. So, yeah.
And this option has to be included with the submission. So just make sure we're all
Correct.
on the same page and clear.
It's a good exercise to think about what would have to be done to that existing building. None of the classrooms would get any larger. All the arrangement would be the same. It's just looking at code and accessibility.
So, a number of years ago, we had done a facilities condition assessment and, it was sort of maintenance and repair costs associated with Glenbrook and Williams, and it was significantly less than this. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, and are we able to compare what this, up to code base repair would mean compared to the study that we had done a few years ago? I was trying to reconcile those two numbers.
It's a fair question, Marty. I mean, I think, again, from PMNC's point of view, they're not looking at like a super specific, you're doing this exact thing here and this exact thing. So looking at generally, they're taking that scope into mind and their familiarity with the, where bids are coming in at the state level. I think that estimate was done in 2021. It did say that there's been over a 20% increase in construction costs from that point to 2024.
Well,
This also includes escalation, assuming that the start date's not today, but in a couple of years when we're finally there. So we have over here on the right, you can kind of see some of the details of how they're getting to that number. So they started off with $400 a square foot. They've included hazardous materials. They've included a separate line item for site work. Then they're including escalation, which you can see is 8.3%. So that's a pretty conservative number for escalation. They're including a 15% design and pricing contingency. So that's saying, again, we don't have a lot of details yet. So we're just adding another 15% on it to cover details that will come up as the design progresses. So you'll see that design and pricing contingency, where these numbers get real is at the end of schematic design, right? Then they will have a design in front of them. We'll have much more information. That design and pricing contingency at that point will probably be somewhere around 10%. And then as we keep doing estimates, it will keep shrinking as they get more and more information.
And then additionally,
Yeah.
that is the energy code too, which was in 2021 where we weren't considering the energy code. Today you are. So that wrapping the entire building and put a new face on the building, that wasn't even in the equation at that point.
And the mechanical replacement cost was looking at, you have a boiler that's old, let's replace it with a boiler that will do roughly the same job.
Right.
Now you probably can't use a gas-fired boiler, so
Yeah,
it's
because you said this was geothermal that they were looking at?
exactly.
Yeah, so that's a big difference as well.
Yeah.
HVAC system.
Does that include closing in the classrooms? Give you.
Yes.
Okay, and, I had more questions. Now I don't remember there. Oh, I know that there's that, funky entrance with the classroom right off the front door. Would that fix that as well?
I think we showed them like a bare minimum scope of some conditions and life safety concerns, but otherwise we left any funky conditions remain.
And,
Technical term.
yeah, well, I didn't wanna raise any red flags. And does it include this would receive MSBA square footage?
So that's a great question, and I think if there's more questions in this slide, I'm happy to cover them, but I think the next slide will actually address that a little bit. So here, this is a table that's required as part of the PDP submission that MSBA wants to see it in exactly this format, minus the columns on the right. We do that to help the town and the district out. So this is a summary of the preliminary design pricing. So again, we have the 5 options on the left, rough dollars per square foot on the left, getting us to that estimated construction cost. So again, there's where the 61 million to 118 million, depending on the option. And those were the numbers generated by PM&C. From there, we applied a 1.3 multiplier to get to a estimated project cost. That might be a little bit on the conservative side, but again, the construction costs are also, not super specific. So for the project costs, that's with everything, with the architecture fees, the OPM fees, furniture, fixtures and equipment, owner's contingency,
The geotech,
moving expenses, everything. So that ranges from 80 million to 153 million, roughly. And then from there, we tried to give a rough idea of the approximate town share based off of what the MSBA will contribute. So let's pick number 8, for instance. So the town share will be roughly 91 million to 106 million, somewhere in that ballpark, depending on a very detailed calculation that we go through with the MSBA on their reimbursement. The big question mark is at number 1. So the question on, how much of that would the MSBA participate in? What's tricky about that question is that it is impossible to get an answer out of the MSBA. We've tried many, many, many times. They will participate in a code upgrade repair to some extent. If that's the only option that a community is considering, they will to some extent. That being said, they will likely not for any space that's undersized. Because again, they want to be putting money into projects that they see as being successful for the next 50 years. So if all of your science classrooms are undersized, why would they spend millions of dollars bringing those up to code if they're not going to be useful to you 2 years from now? So it's likely much, much smaller than the amount of reimbursement that you would get from the other options, but we cannot put a number on it, unfortunately.
So we'll never have a number, if the town says, why don't we just do that one? We're never gonna be able to say, well, we're only getting 70 million for that, or we'll be paying 70 million for that 90 for a new school. So we don't have that option.
You have to, yeah, you unfortunately have to do the awkward explanation that I just gave over and over, unless that is the option that the committee really wants to pursue. And then we really dive into it, and then MSBA is willing to invest the time and effort to figure out exactly which spaces they would be first for or not. But
The one place where MSBA probably would step in is they do have an accelerated repair program that they call it, where they replace the roof, they'll replace windows and doors, and they'll replace your boiler, those 3 items. So they would probably give you your maximum reimbursement on those 3 elements within the building. As Kristen said, the others that aren't enhancing the educational workspace or space for the students, they'd probably say, we're not going to invest in those because they're substandard to what we want the standards to be now.
To me, what stands out with that number one is that's only Glenbrook.
Right.
So we then have an entirely other school that's not much further behind. So, yeah, I'll let you go on, but as we talk about what this looks like moving forward, that's what sticks out to me the most about number one.
So opening up the questions for anybody? Or comments?
Just,
David.
just to elaborate on his comment, I mean, really, it's doubling. You know, so number one times two,
Mhm.
and then compare it to all the rest of the numbers. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Right.
Two things that stood out to me were exactly that same thing was it's double. And you can't do one and not do the other because then it will not pass. I just don't see that happening.
Right.
And then to do two is more than to do one new school, and one new school is only a couple million less than add Reno at
Mhm.
one site. So
Correct.
why not just go new to start with?
So you just have to get graded and explain.
Well, my understanding would be that we wouldn't be able to choose unilaterally that we're going to do a code upgrade and repair at two right now at all. We're in the process for
Mhm.
Glenbrook, which means
Right.
we'd have to go all the way back to square one again, including paying for all of the feasibility study, et cetera, so we should add that on as well. And waiting the years to actually get into the MSBA process for Williams.
Yeah,
In addition
and
to-
at
I
that,
agree with you that I don't think anybody would vote
Yeah.
for just one.
and at that point, do we do a submission for ARP on Williams, right? And, you know, instead of going back the long way, if we know we're gonna do code update only, let's get the major stuff out of it. So I think we're all on the same page. Anybody have a different perspective?
The only thing I'll add to that is that once you do put it all at Glenbrook, you now have a piece of valuable property over at Williams that you can do something with that has value to it. Whether you sell it or use it for some other town facility, you know, that's now back to you if the students aren't there.
I think it's the other way.
Yeah, other way around.
So,
Depending on the option.
Yeah.
Whatever
Right.
property.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
sorry.
No, I was following you.
that's what I was gonna bring up next. I mean, does anybody here think we should keep option number 5, 6 still in consideration? Is there anybody here who doesn't think that that just should be taken out? Okay,
Can we talk about the reasons that we feel 5 and 6 should be taken out just for the sake of.
yeah, and I'm bringing it up because in the previous meetings, we discussed that Glenbrook from a central location within the town was not a good space for it. The second thing was, and then, you know, I'll open up for discussion. Second thing was on the Williams site. The Williams site allowed for us to do new construction on the football field without having to buy any kind of modulars or do any kind of transitioning. Even if we build new on Glenbrook or do add Reno, we're still gonna end up buying modulars because the space just will not allow us to build without doing so. So we're gonna have disruption there. When we're looking at the busing cost, we were talking about probably adding another bus or two to go to Williams, versus going to adding more, or 3 or 4 to go to Glenbrook versus 1 or 2 to go to Williams. So the site just made more sense from a central location perspective. Julie?
Can you go through, I know we talked about this before, I just can't remember car line benefits with one versus the other. Or was it kind of a wash or?
So in talking to our traffic consultants and our civil engineers, I guess it's complicated. I would say that in general, they think that the access to the Williams site is better. But then the ability to have queuing within the site, Glenbrook is a little bit easier to do that. But you'll see at the very end of the presentation today, we do have a few initial site plans to show some options that have really trying to wrap our heads around.
Person?
I was just gonna say, I think that,
You skipped ahead. Huh?
no, I went backwards. I went backwards, thank you. When you're looking at the Glenbrook, the site plan, you know, there's wetlands there as well. So when we're looking at the possibilities, we're kind of more limited to Glenbrook, even if we went new there and with the field and everything, we're kind of limited, as you said, to that footprint. Whereas Williams, I think we have a lot more options to build kind of what we want and what the town wants.
Josh?
Yeah, and I don't think we should discount the access to Glenbrook either. If we're sending every middle school kid in school there,
Into that
it's a
little.
big problem, yeah.
Mhm.
They're going through, either way, it's through a neighborhood. I also think, just thinking long-term for the town, Glenbrook, if we can turn that space into something else, that is a much more, there's a lot more room. I think we can make something much more profitable there. Or, better for the town, better for the tax base. So that's a big win for me.
Yes.
I was agreeing with a lot of what people said, also that the idea of the modulars and the cost with that, but also the massive interruptions to learning with that. All of the concerns about traffic, all of the concerns about all of the things, wetlands, et cetera. But also remembering when we did a tour the winter before last of Glenbrook early on in this process, and asking about, from a sort of maintenance perspective, from a building management perspective, and hearing Nick Jurgens talk about, I think about redundancies as well. That knowing that there's easy access on two sides that are both major throughways, so that if there is an interruption of service on one, the other is likely to still be accessible, is also a factor in that space.
Yeah, and I also know from town infrastructure perspective, the fiber and electric lines run right down Williams. So, from that perspective, I think it's probably easier as well. And I would totally agree with you, Josh, that I think that whatever we decide to do as a town with that parcel later, the Glenbrook becomes much more, I think, a better option for anybody who wants to develop it or for whatever we want to do with it.
Yeah, just a reminder too, those modular units are not reimbursed by the MSBA, so that would be a cost directly to the town, and they're expensive, so that's a couple of years that you're gonna have modular units that you're gonna be paying for, that you get no real benefit out of them.
Okay, so I'm not hearing any objections to removing 6
No, I
or
think-
7.
No, I'm not objecting, but I'm
Five or
saying that
six.
it's worth pointing out that those are the two most expensive.
Oh.
In the
Yeah.
total cost.
Okay.
Estimated, but.
So that's 5 and 6. What about 7? You said we should probably keep one ad reno there?
So once we start the PSR, we have some liberty to spend more time on the one that you're considering. If you think it's worthwhile to get pricing for an ad reno option to that level of detail that we'll get at PSR, we'll do another cost estimate at the end of that phase. It'll be a little bit more detailed than the numbers you're getting today. Not what you're setting your budget on, not that schematic design level, but somewhere in between. So if that's helpful for the town discussion, then I would leave it on the table. But if you don't think that's necessary, then I don't think we're gonna do.
Nicole?
Yes, that's one question of when you say is that worth it? What is the cost of that?
Oh, no monetary cost.
Oh.
I mean, it's just the
Time.
time.
Yeah,
Well, and I'm with you, I think, on this one, like, just to show the town, we vetted out an ad reno, so somebody's gonna ask to have those costs next to each other is
I've got
good.
someone to ask.
1 second.
But the
I'm
new.
gonna go Josh, then I'm going to Nicole, and then I'm going Dave.
Yeah, I remember when I first started this process, in my head, an ad reno must be way cheaper, because you can use some space. And I think a lot of people have that thought. And so if we can say, no, it's not, I think that's very helpful.
Nicole?
So I always remember we had the conversation that ad reno would stay on because of our dedication to our auditorium. But when I looked at these pictures, new already included auditorium in the picture, but I know it's not reimbursed. I just didn't know if that affects the costs of what's reimbursed, what's not, because I think that was a big thing. If we needed to go to our town and say, you'd have to pay for this, that was one of the reasons why we were showing them the two options.
Just so I can clarify that too, from my understanding for today, we need to just decide what the direction we want to go to, not get bogged down in like the numbers yet, because the numbers are there as a guide, but they're going to change once we start getting into the schematics, right, Christian?
So good at queuing up my.
And then, and then as well is, So, yeah, so we're doing direction. At some point, we're gonna have to do some value engineering or whatever we're gonna call it as well to say the geothermal is $4 to $6 million. Do we want to include that in or do we want to do air source, or do we want to do whatever else we can compare it against? We'll be looking at do we want the Gymnasium instead of having a separate auditorium, and that may save us $1 million or $2 million here or there. But we'll be doing that throughout the whole project, but just not at this time, right?
So you don't need to, that was what I was asking.
Yeah.
So new includes auditorium?
For now, yes.
Okay,
It's auditorium, which
Yeah,
is
that's
actually
this one.
bigger than the existing Williams auditorium.
And I think, Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, even the auditorium at Williams, we kind of determined later on that it was even too small to have
oh,
the two schools
okay.
consolidated
Yes.
and use that auditorium. So it's still undersized at that point. So what's the purpose of?
That makes sense. That's why I was just wondering if we took Ed Reno off, would we be telling the town, well, auditorium's off too? I just didn't want to do that,
Yep.
do that.
It's not a set of questions, but when we question, will this cost more? Doing the ad reno at Williams wouldn't cost more because we would be doing the same geo borings and the same site survey of, existing conditions and contours and tree lines. Whereas if we did go with an ad reno at Glenbrook, we would get more site boring costs, which are reimbursable beyond the standard pricing as well as the site. I mean, not huge numbers, but
still additional.
additional.
David, you got something?
Yeah, it's along the same lines as Nicole. So doing the ad reno due diligence, do we then have the information to bring to the town to help justify the investment in the auditorium, which is non-reimbursable through MSBA?
Yeah, I think that's what you're saying. At that point, when we get the more specific pricing, those things would be in there for us to have that discussion, yes.
Right, and then keeping ad reno on the table now because it helps
Right.
build up the supporting.
Yeah, the more, I agree, more data for the public to digest, the better, but not too much. Mari?
Asking the same thing, maybe slightly different way. To what extent and at what point would we be able to isolate the added costs of an auditorium?
So I think during the preferred schematic phase that we'll dive into that, because it's a tricky question because it's not only the square footage of it, but then how that affects your reimbursement rate. So we kind of need to get some rough, estimated construction costs that we can start plugging into the MSBA complicated formula and playing with those options. But yeah, I would certainly want to do that, Jamie.
We'll be able to tease that out.
And the other thing I think for the Williams side, the other thing for the Williams side, I think, is also giving Barry and her team more options in a central location for scheduling, things on the fields after the project's over. So just being able to, get football off of one place, maybe put it on another place or give it some extra space. It's just instead of shipping everybody to the far corner of the town. Sorry, Lynn.
Just a question, it might be premature, but construction timelines for ad reno versus new. Are we looking at substantially different timelines?
Another great point. In general, the ad reno will likely take longer, right? You've got to shuffle people around and
Yep.
just mobilize here and then mobilize there.
Again, that's additional moving costs that you're gonna have from emptying classrooms to one area and then doing a renovation and then moving them back to another area. So you're doing multiple moves at that time as well.
Why would people pick that choice?
They're gonna cost more, slow down construction. You're
Cost more, take longer. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, if it's a brand new building, you definitely be looking at a hard bid, a design bid build versus a construction manager at risk. If you're doing an ad reno and you're shuffling students around, and you're phasing it, you definitely would probably want to have a construction manager at risk involved and you're part of the design, the whole team here to work that all out so that it works smoothly. So, and CMs at risk do cost a little bit more than a hard bid in most cases. So something to just keep in the back of your mind.
Okay, so going back, we are good. We're removing 5 and 6. We'll keep 1, 7, and 8.
Vote on that? Would you like a vote on that?
Sure, we'll take a vote for that. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, any more discussion? Seeing none, Lynn,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Carissa,
Yes.
Julie, Nicole,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Josh,
Yes.
Marty,
Yes.
Harmon, yes. Unanimous. Did I miss anybody? No.
I don't know.
Anybody online? You got 8, 9, no, we got 9, we're good. Come on, Tom.
I'm trying to keep up.
You're the numbers guy.
Still writing a motion down.
All right,
So this gets into a little bit of what we were just talking about, but just to, because we know, a local share of between, 91 and 107 million, that ballpark, we know is a big number. And so we just wanted to reassure you that now, again, tonight, we're not picking a number, we're picking a few options. And then we can continue, cost explorations as we go forward. So just to break it down a little bit, during the preferred schematic report, again, to your question, Marty, that's really where we'll get into inclusion of the auditorium, size of the stage. Right now, the gymnasium is shown as a little bit over the MSBA standards. Athletic storage, recreational fields and site costs. We've started talking with the district about just a little bit, but that will get, we'll dive into some more detail on that. Geothermal, which we've been talking about. We'll have our other George from LN Consulting, our mechanical engineer, come to one of our meetings and really describe some of the details on that whole process, including kind of rough building massing. So those are the numbers that will get wrapped into the end of the preferred schematic report. And then once we have that preferred schematic, which again is looking like number 8, but that's when we'll really dive into schematic design. And then the cost will reflect, very specific mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection systems, grading, which ends up having a tremendous cost impact on these projects. It's something that really surprises me every time we get to a cost estimate phase. The importation or exportation of soils has a huge impact on how the numbers go. Architectural finishes, amount of glazing, structural system, again, details on that. We'll have geotechnical information by that. Then we'll have detailed hazardous materials reports. We'll probably even have done some destructive testing at that point, so we can really understand the hazardous materials, understanding how we're going to interact with the local utilities, and then that choice of design, bid, build versus CM at risk. So all of those factors will then be incorporated into that schematic design. Questions I'm looking forward. So you guys are ahead of us, so this is where we're going to ask for the vote on the preferred schematic options. In the next slide, or just get that scoring again with the members at the bottom. To kind of summarize it on the approximate total project costs. But again, it sounds like we're going with number 1, number 7, and number 8.
Is this an actual document you would submit to the MSBA this week?
Almost everything that you see tonight will go into the 2D, the preliminary design program.
I'll still Bill Gray out.
Okay.
Bill Gray out the 5 and 6, I guess.
Okay.
Marty, PDP?
Vote to approve the PDP report, specifically the ed plan, is that?
The ed plan?
Is that what we're?
Oh, no.
Just to approve the submission, we just need to update it officially in the minutes. And
Okay.
really, that's what you've already done, but Mark, if you go to the next slide,
So that vote we just took is what you needed tonight?
we need one more.
Okay.
And that's to approve the preliminary design program going to the MSBA. And this is the table of contents. So the next slide, I won't go through all of this, but specifically these to me are the parts that are very, very important. So introduction, a lot of it is information from the design team. A lot of it is information from Colliers, most of which we have in hand already, so it's great. So project directory, project schedule. So the educational program narrative, that is what's coming from the district. And I know Marty has been hard at work on that with a lot of support from the district. So we really appreciate that, a lot of back and forth. The visioning report that will come from us and from our consultants. The space summary template, in chapter number 3, again, that's really detailing the size of each science classroom, the size of the gym, the size of the stage. And that will be important so that we start getting feedback from the MSBA on what they will and will not participate in. So this is kind of our first, attempt at showing them what we'd like the school to look like, and then we get feedback from this submission. A lot of the binder will really just be on evaluation of existing conditions. We've gone through those very briefly with you all, but they'll be more detailed in the binder, everything from architectural, kitchen, security, et cetera. For this project, we have that twice. So we did that both for Glenbrook and also for Williams. Then a separate section on the site development requirements, again, for both sites. And then the estimated preliminary costs, which we went through tonight, is a very important part of chapter 6. And then I've got the wrong ones boxed here because I failed to predict which ones you guys were going to vote on. But we do have a few site plans that I mentioned. But anyway, this is the table of contents for the PDP. And so if we could get an official vote approving that submission.
Marty, can I mention that the education plan, it's largely the same as what was provided to you at the last meeting. One of the sections though that was added that might be of interest, and Christian, you can fill in some of the gaps here, is section 17 on the functional and spatial relationships. And so I thought it might be worth just a couple of minutes on that particular section, because I think that section 17 is highly reflective of the visioning work that has gone on and the feedback that JWA has gathered. So just to highlight a few things, the notion of a central crossroads and common spaces, the notion of clustering the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades into academic neighborhoods. So it's that, rather than having 6th graders through 8th grade all kind of intermixed by discipline, the idea is that they would be clustered by grade level. So that's like a really important underlying concept that we've talked about. The importance of special education spaces, and Dory and I were on the phone with our director of special education at length a couple of days ago, just making sure that the space can accommodate existing and rising special education needs. And so we have some separate programs at both Glenbrook and Williams. And so this would accommodate those sub-separate programs and provide space for all the related services that students in those programs receive. The academic wing adjacencies, one of the things that came out of the visioning was this idea that the specials ought to have their sort of own dedicated wing. I think we were all drawn in by the arrangement at Glenbrook where, there's the wing of the arts and the STEAM classrooms. So I think we're going to try to preserve that. And then an adjacency between the library and the STEAM classroom was another driving factor as well. Health classrooms adjacent to the gymnasium. Lots of conversations about what ought to be at the front of the building. Everybody wants everything at the front of the building. Unfortunately, there's only one front of the building, but Christian, you can talk a little bit about that if I'm not describing that well. But really, the core community spaces accessible to the community towards the front of the building. Spaces for social emotional supports, including the concept of a Zen Den, a place where students just have an opportunity to unwind and re-regulate if necessary. And that's about all I'd highlight, but also lots of questions and concerns around the queuing of cars and buses and that kind of thing. So Christian, I don't know if there's anything I missed that you'd highlight that in terms of the the functional and spatial relationships, but I would say to anybody, if you're going to read any one part of this report, that might be a good part to read, just because it gives you a sense of the vision and work that went on. But if anybody has any other questions on that educational plan, let us know. But my understanding is that MSBA scrutinizes the special education narrative very closely with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So it was a ton of work by our admin team. I gave everyone $1 per edit, so we owe them quite a bit of money. So,
Make sure they didn't do it right the first time.
That's a good point. Probably a couple of grammatical issues and formatting things that we'll still have to clean up, but it's 99.5% done, I'd say.
Any questions for Marty or JWA or Colliers on the submission? Seeing none, I'd call for a motion to approve the submission of the PDP.
So.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call for a vote. Julie?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Marty?
Yes.
Present?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Armin, yes. 9-0. All right. You got anything else?
Just for fun.
Yeah.
Go one more.
The
So,
committee's nothing but fun.
so getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but, we got these from, our site team, just yesterday. And will be included in the PDP. So we just wanted to get them up there and start, the conversation with you, but, if you actually flip to the next one, Marty, and then we can go back and forth. So you can see there's two options here, both at Williams. And what we're really trying to grapple with is the queuing, saving as many sports fields or creating as many sports fields as possible. And then kind of how site circulation will happen. So in both options, we're considering a shorter bus drop-off line towards the front of the school, towards Williams. North is to the right, so it's a little bit confusing, but it fit better on the slide. So on the south side of the school would be the bus drop-off. And then we're trying to think about a kind of an extended parent queuing line. So this one keeps a more efficient parking arrangement, but does somewhat isolate the school from the sports fields. Just to play with options, this also doesn't show any parking near Williams, but that could be more of a landscaped and kept more natural and separation from the street. Whereas the previous version, between the two, yeah, so this one has the fields still kind of connecting with the school, although we do need that loop road to go around one of them. Some more parking to the west side, and then again, some additional parking at the south side, closer to Williams. So super early concepts, but interesting to start, considering this, and we'll get into exactly the number of buses that'll fit, and exact number of parking spaces. In general, we've been tasked to start off with trying to combine the number of parking spaces at Glenbrook with the number of parking spaces at Williams, make that combined total fit on the site. And so there's also some interest in, right now, these fields were, just roughly taken from the fields that were laid out there now. But should we change the arrangement somewhat and try and make one of them a full-size practice football field that can be used by the community and the high school, and then the other ones become a little bit smaller? All of that would be, to be entertained and thought about. It's an interesting site with the pedestrian access off of Terry Drive, and that proximity to the high school. So we certainly want to keep that in mind. And then in general, you can see with all of these, we are trying to have most or all of the vehicular circulation off of Williams and not off of Wolfsburg.
Is that two-way for cars coming in off of Williams? I'm having a hard time seeing the arrows.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
My friend's gonna yell at me, but it's Woolworth. So if that comes up.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
No S.
It'll come up. It's,
Yeah. Good catch.
Does Woolworth not continue through in this new arrangement?
It does not.
But we don't shut off access, emergency access.
So it would still be a paved road with,
A gate?
yeah.
I think that's the original thought for now, yeah.
Your version of what you have at Glenbrook by the playing fields, right?
Just something like that, if we decided to do that, is that something that could just be decided in this process, or does that have to go to? I'm just thinking when there was a street that was closed off on one end that had to go to town meeting and be voted on, do we know the process for something like that? Okay.
Or blocking the street?
Yeah.
I don't think it's town meeting,
Yeah, I don't think
probably
so.
a DOT or. DEP.
Safety committee.
Yeah.
Because there is a gate there, they just have to close it, right?
No, it's open and it's a.
That's what, no, I know it's,
Yeah.
I know that, I'm just wondering if that would even, if it's already set up, they just don't use it that way.
I don't know if the gate is still there. There was until years ago, the custodian would go
Oh,
out.
no, it's not.
I think that's the metal is there.
Yeah, physically took the
Yeah.
gates off.
Yeah, I don't think
I
there's.
think because there were concerns about public safety. I
Yeah, that
guess.
came to the school committee a couple of years ago, remember? And
Not a year
we
ago,
did,
yes.
did the investigation. It is a legal thoroughfare. I mean, it's
Yes.
not, that whole road from
Parking.
Converse to Williams
Right.
is a road.
Oh, actually, because you can't have a street that just ends like that, because emergency vehicles need to be able to turn around. So I don't know how to accomplish that.
What
How would
I
that be
understand,
different?
we can't close it.
Well, how would that be different than Quinnipiac?
That was the street I was. That.
I don't know.
You went there. I mean, if a fire truck went there, they have to
Because they
back
can
up.
open it up.
Right.
That's why I did
Yeah,
it.
that's why I would envision the same thing.
But then there's a pavement on the other side. I don't
Yeah.
know. It was
No.
a little early.
Yeah.
Hard for the horse.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
These are nice little sketches though.
Good.
Nicole,
No, I just, did we hear what, I think.
Nick
I mean,
Nick
that's-
said, yeah.
Nick, we
Nick,
missed
keep it
your,
honest.
we missed your comment there, Nick.
I was saying, from what I understand, we're not allowed to close the gate to Woolworth.
Ian, you have something?
I'm not sure if this is helpful or not. I'm confused. Are the current pullbacks or the setbacks, would that impact any residential lot lines? I guess my question is, would we have to purchase or change any current lot setups?
No, that's just, that's letting us know kind of the extent of what we can develop on the site, just from the, permitting requirements, in town. Such as the 5-foot setback, the back, 40-foot setback off of Williams, and 15 on both, side yards. So, yeah, just kind of giving us our demarcation. You will notice that, we're putting the vehicular, access on the opposite side of this now. Part of that is so that as the cars turn around and come back through, then the passenger drop off is on the correct side of the car. Also allows for more room for queuing. And so that's a big reason on why we're kind of flipping that to the eastern side instead of the western.
And just real preliminary, where's the front of the school?
Well, that's a good question, right? So we had always considered it to be, well, always. We had so far considered it to be the south, right where it says bus drop off.
Okay.
If we go with this scheme, they hadn't flipped our diagram, but I think that we would probably flip the school footprint as well. Have the classrooms open to the west. And then you would have somewhat of a dual entrance both to the south and to the east of the school.
Yeah.
And there may be some benefits that way. I mean, I know that the student circulation at Glenbrook is nothing to copy.
Well, there's 3 at Glenbrook now, so it's 3 to 2.
It is helpful that they're able to divide the students up to some amount and not have them all come through one.
Jordan?
door.
And this one was somewhat looking at the south entrance, right, for the bus drop off and the north for the parent drop off, to separate them, but also have the north by the cafeteria and the bus one by the admin and main entry kind of. So those are more into the depth of the staff design, but things to make sure.
Could it be a horseshoe going around the back side of the school instead of coming back down and connecting? So that it's just a loop across the back and then back out to I guess the west side of the.
Yeah, you were talking about exiting where the buses.
Yeah, so it's a longer loop maybe, but then you're not coming back into traffic and that where it's entering. So it's almost one way, maybe during pickup and drop off.
Yeah.
You don't think people
Nicole?
I was wondering if we- I remember that's really good.
Yeah.
Like this, but I'm curious if where the buses are exiting, is there still, or could there still be a connection to the parking lot? So I'm picturing how many more staff we're talking about now in this space and how fun it will be to go all the way down the traffic on Williams to then get into that same car line to try to get to the parking spaces. And I'm thinking like Westfield once upon a time had it set up so that the buses came out on one side and there were no car entries there except for to go to the parking lots for the staff. So if there's, that could, in other words, it could make an alternate entry. It is not available to families because it only leads to staff parking. But it is
Like the parking lot
buses
here.
coming out, cars coming in for staff members might some of the traffic as well.
Currently, our staff risks their lives to walk from their car into the front door.
Exactly, and kind of cut some of that out as well.
Seriously.
I have seen it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Especially the Woolworth, the ones who just cut through have no desire to even drop off a kid.
Right.
They're just playing.
Just open the door, throw them out.
Yeah.
Would there be-
Parking is to the,
Would there be speed bumps in the new design?
Speed bumps.
I know that's a
can't-
weird question, but
certainly.
it
I
might
know,
slow down some of the craziness that happens on campus and at schools when they don't have
I don't
them.
think you're allowed to talk about speed bumps in Longmeadow.
Just not on Green Acre. Okay, cool. Anything else? So we have a meeting scheduled for next week unless somebody has a really pressing need to have another meeting this month. We were gonna say no meeting and we were gonna meet back the regular meeting in June. Everybody good with that?
Which is what? Regular meeting in
Yeah, what
June.
was
Second
is-
Wednesday.
Second Wednesday of the month.
I just, we've kind of been moving around. I just want clarity for the minutes.
It would be the
Mr.
12th,
Yeah.
Wednesday, June 12th.
Thank you.
I'll have my eighth grade graduation dance that night, so.
Marty, you have anything else?
Nothing else?
Is there a motion to adjourn?
We'll face start.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call for any discussion? Okay, call for a vote. Julie, Nicole,
yes.
David, Josh,
Yes.
Marty,
Yes.
Armin, yes, Marissa,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Chris has left. We are 8 and 0 and 1% is left. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Armin.